So welcome everybody to the second in the CCA 50th anniversary annual gathering, second of our workshop series for our ongoing annual gathering. The weekend always goes by so fast. I think it's really nice for it to be extended this year, especially as we celebrate 50. So just to begin, so this is our On Addiction workshop. Before we get started, the one thing I'd just like to remind everybody of is just that we enter into these sessions with a sense of respectfulness, that we're all here to learn. Today, folks will be opening up and sharing some of their stories as well. So we just ask that we carry each other's stories and each other's words with a sense of respectfulness, a sense of open-mindedness, that we be thoughtful about our comments and avoid comments that might be intentionally hurtful of someone else. And if we all could just go ahead and give a visible thumbs up on our screen that we consent to that covenant together. That's great. All right, so thank you all. I'm going to go ahead and mute myself and turn it over to Allison so she can introduce our panelists.
Thank you everyone for coming. We're really glad to see you all here. Maybe this is your first workshop, but it's our second one, and we're glad to see about the same number of participants here. But we're going to be hearing about addiction in Appalachia and Sister Beth and Sister Kathy's own journeys and the work that's in the region. I'll just give a brief introduction about both of them. I'm sure many of us know them and have heard lots about them, but Sister Beth Davies, Congregation of Notre Dame, has witnessed firsthand the ways in which environmental issues, public health, and addiction are all interconnected. In her over 48 years of ministry in Appalachia, Sister Beth assisted in the development of a network of medical clinics, worked for environmental protections in her community, built effective substance use disorder and addiction programs, and worked with others to change the Virginia criminal justice system to improve treatment of inmates. And Sister Beth lives in Pennington Gap, Virginia. And we also have Sister Kathy O'Hagan, Sisters of Notre Dame de Namur. She came to Appalachia 45 years ago to help establish Big Laurel Learning Center in southern West Virginia. Originally, it was a school which now hosts programs for the underserved community, self-help for women, and summer camps for local children. Sister Kathy lives in Mingo County, West Virginia, where she has led 12-step recovery retreats for over a decade. And we're really excited to hear from both of them, and we're just going to turn it over to Sister Beth and Sister Kathy.
Okay, this is Beth, and I think I'll just begin very quickly by qualifying myself as an alcoholic. And when we talk about whether I say alcoholic or addiction, it's all the same. Okay, but whatever the chemical is, we're addicted to all of them. But I'm just going to just tell you a little bit my story that brought me into recovery. I was driving here in Pennington Gap, and I had been drinking quite a bit, and I ran into a car with a mother and her young child. And I was really so far gone, I wasn't sure what happened to them, but I was picked up and taken to jail. And at that time in our jail, they have loads of women today, but at that time, it was in the 70s, they didn't have a lot of women. In fact, I was the only woman in the jail. And when I got in there and they threw me in a cell, actually threw me in the cell, they closed the door and they said, "You drunk." And that was my lowest point. You know, I never felt so alone, so abandoned, and like nothing. I thought I was nothing. And I remember getting down on my knees and asking God, please help me. I can't handle it. And it was the first time, I'd been drinking for years, it was the first time I had admitted the truth. I can't handle it. And I recognized later that I actually took the first step of the 12-step program I took in that jail cell, abandoned and like nothing. And that was the beginning of my journey to recovery. And I'm so grateful for that today. Of course, I could not say that now. By the way, the mother and the young child were not injured, but I didn't know that at the time. But anyway, that was the beginning of my journey. And it was a long one. And I was one who, from the very first drink, never took a drink in my life. I didn't know what that meant. It always called for more. So that's a little bit of who I am. And thank God
Yes.
through that, I was introduced to AA and the 12 steps through that experience. The hand of AA was there and reached out to me. And I'm forever grateful.
Thanks, Beth. What I want to share is that Beth is the one that made the intervention when I got into the AA program 35 years ago. And it was very difficult for me. I went to a 28-day treatment program and I hid out because it's a very shame-based illness, and didn't know it was an illness. I thought it was a moral weakness or whatever. I thought it was easier just to hide out. And then I was with a lot of Philip Morris workers that didn't drink the way I drank, and I didn't do drugs just because they probably weren't available. If I wasn't in the sisterhood, I probably would have. And so I couldn't identify, or what I learned at St. John's is maybe I would leave and stay sober for about 3 years, and then I could go back to what gave me comfort. I could go back to what helped me to solve my anxiety, and I could go back to what worked for me, but just not take so much. I didn't understand it as an illness yet. So I got sent myself off to Emmaus House through Beth's help. And that was a treatment center for sisters. And not that we needed different treatment, but sometimes in the other places there was some challenges. And there was a lot more shame, like, how do we drink? Well, same way other people do, you raise the cup. So, they kept me 5 months. The other place was 28 days, and it was a full holistic program where dealt with family of origin issues. We just lost our 5th person, my nephew Norman, to addiction. So we've had 5 people who have gone home to God as addicts, and I'm sure has been well received. And maybe we drink in heaven. I don't know, but I'm hoping we do. But we won't have the disease, so we'll be all right. That was a joke.
Yeah.
But anyway, that I really want to publicly just thank Beth.
Thank you.
So we open up for your questions, your concerns. I have a project called Project Fact. You can see it on the Big Laurel brochure website, and people can come for short periods of time or for help if they wish. And right now it's a little bit difficult with COVID, although we have received some people. I have some Project Fact members that are coming. We do the spatial problems.
Mhm.
I mean, distance. So there's Project Fact, and that's on our website. And I also did meetings in the area for 7 years, and I found it really difficult. People basically came in and got their papers signed. And after 7 years, it kind of wore me out, and I did not do AANA meetings in the area anymore. In the Kermit area itself, it was extremely challenging, but I hung in for 7 years. People don't tend to understand it. A lot of times when people get recovery, they get it through churches. We do have in Williamson, West Virginia, about an hour away, we do have Serenity Point. It's very much Jesus-based, and so it makes it hard on people that, and I told them if they want me to come, I don't come right now because of COVID, that I'm pretty much a big book stomper. That's the big book of AA, and all they'll get from me is the 12 steps, 200 words that if we do it, we won't have to drink today. So just keep
That's
it
right.
very simple. People's brains are pretty fried. So do we open it up now, Beth, for questions or?
I might just say to them that, you know, when I say alcoholics, I mean addicts, any addicted person at all. They're not any more broken than the rest of us, all right, addicts. But we're unable to hide it anymore. We're always getting into some kind of crisis. And then it's the crisis that we've gotten into is the very thing that brings us into recovery. Because when we're in crisis, like I was in crisis in jail, okay, what happened in that crisis? The hand of AA reached out and brought me into community. And the beautiful thing about the program, it is a system that the most important thing is it's an ongoing community. And people with these, they talk about themselves as recovering alcoholics, recovering addicts. What it is saying is they're recovering. This is just constantly reminding each one that the process of recovery is ongoing. And because the crisis is ongoing, the community is ongoing. So it's just a beautiful way of people beginning for the first time. And it's always the thing in the long run that all of us were looking for. We were looking for community. And we found it in that 12-step program. And the fact that it has lasted and it's all over the world, in every country, every language. I remember being in Mexico and seeing there's a little logo that it's been an AA meeting in the place. I couldn't speak the language, but I went in and didn't have to speak the language. And what speaks with each one in recovery is the language of the heart. We just know, and people just become totally one community. And it's based on the 12-step program, which is, I remember reading The Road Less Traveled, and Scott Peck said, if everyone could live the 12-step program, we'd have peace in the world. Anybody can follow the 12 steps. It's not just for the addict. But anyway, I just wanted to share that.
Yeah, I think we had talked in our planning about, there are many other treatments to be more individualized to different people are going to recover in different ways. Could you all share with how your different ministry and addiction, what you've learned about the various recovery options and I know it's going to be what's been successful for you all, but what you've seen there.
Now, when you talk about the different recovery options, there are recoveries that reach out that are church-based, that are religion-based, that are, and I remember one minister, there was somebody in his church was coming to AA, and he told that person who desperately needed the recovery group, he told them, come to church, you don't need that, you go to church. So I called him on the phone just to have a conversation. And I told him, we talked about different things, and I said, Minister, John, his name was, I said, when, I have a heart attack, please don't bring me to church and have people pray over me. Please bring me to the place where people are trained in treating people with heart conditions. And he just kind of looked back, And I said, and this is what we're talking about. They're going to the very people who are in recovery and who can share their recovery with somebody else. And he began to get a little different message and wasn't so, because he would put down AA terribly. And if they'd only go to church, they'd be okay. And that you will hear that. So not as much now, because the recovery community is pretty wide open now, and it's increased and multiplied, thank God. But that was a very difficult thing for some people. And one person who was in recovery did go back to the church, and he died of his disease. And I mean, it broke my heart. And there was no way I could intervene in any way. He didn't want to intervene with his church and with his pastor and so forth. So it was tough. But things like that are beginning to change. And of course, today we understand the disease a lot better than we did before. It's a brain disease. It's an active brain disease. And we can show slides on now today to show people's brains. And you can see the difference in the brain of the person. If you put a mood-altering drug into a person who's prone to addiction, ooh, does that brain light up. And then the pleasure part of the brain, it just completely lights up. And you give that same mood-altering drug to a non-addict, and there's no light up of the brain. See? But the pleasure, right away is immediately felt, and it always calls for more.
What I think what I know it does from the studies, the scientific studies, is the constant use of the drugs binds to the nerve cell, and you can't make your own serotonin, you can't make your own dopamine. The drugs do some destruction there. It depends on how long the addict goes, and I sponsor someone who has a serotonin uptake drug, a small dose of it, and it seems to help her. So there can be a lot of damage that the alcohol does to the brain. It's one of the, I believe it's one of the few drugs, maybe the only drug, that hits the brain in 90 seconds, goes straight to the brain. So I used to think of alcohol as a pretty mute drug. People were on thisy and thatty thing, but it attaches that quickly. And 90 seconds isn't very long to go straight to the brain. So it does a lot of damage. At the end of my addiction, I remember whining to Beth that I couldn't read. She didn't say too bad because she was kind, but I said, I can't focus. And I read a paragraph and I understand about the first 2 lines and I just can't understand it. And she said, well, that may come back and it may not. May not? May not. I'm a teacher. Well, I went on for my master's in addiction counseling, so I was very happy. God gave me a good brain. I wanted to say one more thing about Celebrate Recovery, and I don't want to, in no way am I putting it down because it works for some people. That's the Serenity Point in Williamson. They terrible lot of reading. Oh my God, bless me. I couldn't read in the early days of recovery. And what Celebrate Recovery does, it's a long book with a lot of scripture passages. It's sin-based. So some of the people I work with feel very guilty. I mean, what drives you back to the bottle better than guilt or to the pills or to the... So it really concerned me. And so I just stuck with the, if you want what I have, all I can give you is the 12-step program. 200 words, you do them, and your life's going to get better. Make you an offer you can't refuse, really, 200 words. So that I'm probably a big maybe, Beth, should we open it up for questions?
Sure, yes. Yes,
Yes, I have about about a handful of questions here that I've been gathering from folks and trying to put them in order here. But in general, to kind of keep us kind of in the broader scale of things, so we talk generally about, addiction is a disease, and that there are some other, dimensions to it. That is a disease, and how maybe your surroundings are a part of that, and environmental issues. And so wondering if you all had any thoughts about poverty or like social aspects in people having their addiction. And then I have a few questions more specific about certain drugs and a certain treatment option after that. And then the questions are a little broader. All right.
So the first one, then, you're asking the conditions, the environment, and the way people are living and so forth. Are you saying, does that, add to it, or?
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah.
certainly, the environment and the conditions in which people are living. First of all, if they're conditions that are harsh, that can be very depressing anyway. And so that people who are living in such conditions and see no way out, that becomes just a kick, just kicks off any kind of anything that will remove or relieve that pain. And oftentimes, when people do pick up a drink or a drug, any drug, alcohol's a drug, when they do pick it up, they get relief, and that relief feels good. With some, depending upon their brain, because it is a brain disease, with some, that just taking that will be enough to kick off and start the addiction rolling. And they'll go back for more and more. As we say, one is too many and 100's not enough for us. And that's true. The first one, if I were to pick up one today, I'd be off and running. I know it. First one in, and I'm off and running. And I know that today, so I'm not going to take the first one. I don't need it. But we've learned more and more about this disease, and actually, people, it's not known as much because they see so much talk about other drugs, and that's what we read about, that's what we hear about, because they're getting into trouble, and they have to get money to buy the drugs and so forth. But there are far more. You could take every addict we have in society, the number of alcoholics far surpasses the number of people on all other drugs combined. There's no comparison. So that just tells you, how serious this drug is. And of course, it's relatively cheap, so this helps too, you know. But it's by far, there's not a drug that compares with the numbers of who have this disease. There's no comparison. I thought of you, Kathy. It's kind of it's not a funny story, but it isn't at all. Kermit, where Kathy lives, Kathy, I think it was about 382 people, I think they gave us the population of Kermit. And 2 years into this, when we were hearing all about all these drugs coming in and all of that, in 2 years, drug companies shipped 9 million opioid pills to Kermit with a population of 382 people. And this Dr. Catherine Hoover, who was doing this, had something to do with this. Well, you can imagine what Kermit became. I mean, we all knew where Kermit was because those who were addicted to opioids knew where to go. And if that was one of the closest places, that's where they'd go. But, I mean, that's how people have taken, or companies have taken this disease and then played on it just to get everything was about money, 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 So we've learned a lot, and these smaller places sometimes have learned quicker because they tend to use us as places, to get people to, to get onto the drug. Once they're on the opioids, for example, and addicted, there's no way they can get off. They just need more and more of the drug to relieve the pain. And it's the same with the alcohol, if you're in it. But it's not easy. But the wonderful thing is we're learning more and more. And I'm convinced that if we could take the stigma away, the stigma, people don't ask for help mostly in the beginning because they feel there's something wrong with them. They're sinners, they're no good, they're worth nothing. So they don't want to say they're having a problem with a drink or a drug, any drug at all, because of that terrible stigma. And if we can get rid of the stigma, and I think more and more the stigma is breaking down because of the fact that we understanding this disease more. But the stigma is there, and it will kill more alcoholics and drug addicts than any other thing that's there.
Sister Kathy, do you have anything you'd want to add to that before the next question?
No,
Great. So in general, do either of you have any knowledge or experiences in your work to talk a little bit more about OxyContin and what that's done to the region, and also the medical treatment of Suboxone, which I know is controversial for some folks. I'm just wondering how you feel about that.
well, feeling, it's not feeling, it's the Suboxone. I think it's misused in the area. And I think as long as it's a sin base, in our area, it's much more a sin base. If you're an addict, I don't go around at the grade school where I work and stuff, and I'm a little bit more protective of my anonymity there. We're in an area where it's drinking and drug use is preached against, and that's not a bad thing, but you really are a bad person. You really are a sinner. And if you would just give your life to Jesus, which I did that many times. I had a special rock back in the woods, and I would turn everything over, and I would sit on that rock, and it makes you feel really bad about yourself. And so people in here suffer that way. I don't know what to say to your question. It's just a Suboxone, I think, is good for some. The nephew that I lost, I think, was going to try it, and I kind of think it might have worked for him, but a lot of times it's misused. And I think the 12 steps doesn't work for everybody, but it does work for a lot of people, the spiritual program. So same old thing, pain plus learn relief equals more pain. And that's what we end up with. And they have to learn a new thing. It's the way I explain it to kids is a good way. When I would give lessons in the Kermit grade school, is take a big glass with food coloring. You just put a little bit in, but when it turns bright red, the person's an addict. And it was based on that study from a woman who was working in the city and discovered that the Skid Row drunks had a byproduct of heroin in their brain. So it's a very strong drug. But to try to educate the younger kids is what I would like to do. A lot of their parents are addicted. But I don't think that really answers your question. I'm not really sure how to answer that. I don't have the stats on that, on Suboxone.
I was going to
people I know it doesn't work. They use it, misuse it.
Okay, I think, first of all, OxyContin was first introduced into, believe it or not, Lee County, Virginia. At the same time OxyContin was introduced here, it was introduced in a little place up in Washington County in Maine. This is interesting. Purdue Farmer, which made OxyContin, they knew how addictive this drug was. They came here and they went to doctors, to pharmacies, and they were trying to let them know this OxyContin, they said this will be the end of any kind of addiction you're going to have because it's a time release drug that will just come into the system little by little, and this will take care of all your addicts because it's a time release drug. Well, every one of us addicts knows you just break the thing, and then you take it just as it is, or snort it, or shoot it up. But anyway, it came into us, and it practically destroyed our community. And we knew immediately, Dr. Van Zee and I, the doctor that I work with at the community health clinic here, we immediately informed Purdue Pharma, which is in Stamford, Connecticut. And Purdue Pharma, we let them know immediately that there was a problem here. And I remember when we first heard of it, I remember a person coming in and saying, she was talking about oxys and OCs and oxys and OCs. It had just come in. I didn't know what an oxy was or an OC was. I didn't know what she was talking about. So I called the pharmacist, and he said, Beth, mark my words, this will be the worst thing that has ever come and happened in Lee County or anywhere once it's out there. This will destroy our community. He knew immediately, and he was a recovering addict. Anyway, and that's exactly what it did. It came in, they couldn't get pills fast enough, sure enough, it just blew out the whole community. And then it moved up, went up into West Virginia, went all around, up into Kentucky. It just was like something had come in, and well, it's almost like the virus, coronavirus, came in, and it just went all over every community. I never saw a drug go so fast into communities and destroy communities as fast as OxyContin did. We tried to get it. We were online. We had a petition to remove OxyContin from the being prescribed until they reformulated it. You can take a drug like that, reformulate it, as we did with another drug in the 70s. You can reformulate it so that it's not as addicting. But you may be sure Purdue wasn't a bit interested in making it less addicting. In fact, now that, we've taken them to court and we've been in court and they've been sued so many times. But now when all of their papers are coming out, all of the information about them, that's the very thing they wanted to do. They were sure, this is it, this is what we have. This will go and this will sell like no other drug we have. And just using people as though they were just here, just another dot for them that would be another bit of money for the company. And we ended up taking that company we took a suit out against them because we just at that point just had to do something to get this thing at least online, people realizing what it was, because it was destroying community after community. I see Sharon over there, her face up there, and I know Sharon understands that well. I mean, it came so fast that people were addicted almost immediately. And I can remember one young man saying, "Ooh, this is the best yet." Couldn't get another one fast enough because it right away was so addicting. And so all of these drugs, and no matter what they are and what they're, but remember, I'm telling you, no one of them, with all of that we've had, surpasses the number of alcoholics. Alcohol, and people seem to say, well, because it doesn't cost much and you can get it over the counter and this and that. If we knew what alcohol was all about when it first came out, alcohol would not be on the shelves the way it is today because of the addictive component to it. People had to learn that. And of course, we learned it the hard way, because we have more alcoholics than any other addict, anywhere. So, but
Yeah, with the people I work with, I'll say something and they'll say, well, I'm off oxys and I'm off this and I'm like, I do a little bit of alcohol, but not too much. Well, that's just going to creep up on them. And it's just a shame because it's not a mute drug. So
you're right. And when parents will say, well, I'm so glad he or she is not on drugs. And of course,
yeah,
they're drinking alcohol, they're killing themselves, and they'll say, but at least they're not on drugs. It's a concept that's hopefully beginning to change, and it is getting better. But a lot of education. It needs a lot of education, and I'm sure people even listening tonight with some of it. It's important to know this, and not to make light of it, because we don't know ourselves. I knew from the first drink. I was a kid. I never took a drink in my life. I always needed more from the first one, even as a little kid. You know, that so it's really something that we just have to understand more, and then the stigma. We have a brain disease, and let's not stigmatize it, because that will keep more people away from getting help than anything else. And then we're talking about medication-assisted treatment, MAT, okay, the medication-assisted treatment, which Kathleen was talking about, and that's the Suboxone Subutex. We don't do the Subutex because it's too addicting. This Suboxone, uh, any drug, I don't care what the drug is that a person has to take, whether it's for high blood pressure, anything, if it's used correctly, it's going to work the way it was made for, if it's used correctly. And Suboxone for us, the medication-assisted treatment for us, has really, we have so many people in recovery leading normal lives. And eventually, many of them get off that eventually. But what it does, it makes their lives normal, and they can go on, and they get jobs, and they're acting as any other person can. There will be a few people, and we don't down that at all. There will be a few people who will probably have to stay on medication-assisted treatment for the rest of their lives, for whatever reason, whatever their makeup is, whatever it is, but that's few and far between. Most of them get off it eventually, but it's a lifesaver, I can tell you that, working day in and day out with hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of addicts and alcoholics.
Great. I still have a few more questions. I don't know if we're going to get to all of them before the end, but one recently that came in that I think kind of speaks to this broad sense. So speaking as to women with addictions, how important do you feel is it to defund the police and the means to reallocate funds towards more focused mental health care and appropriate reactions to calls for help?
Well, when you say,
that one, I read that one.
yeah, go ahead.
That one bothers because it pits one thing against the other. Both, yeah, it pits one. My grandfather was a police officer, a cop. We shouldn't be pitting one thing against another, I think. So defunding the police is not a good idea. Maybe training them better, maybe doing other things. But we do need to figure out how to reallocate more funds to mental health. I don't know, let Beth go, but I saw Ed Sloan's question up there as well. Go ahead, Beth.
No, I was just going to say, it's reforming something. It's not doing away with something. We're doing away with police. We're not going to do away ever. We certainly need, and also some police, and they'll ask for it themselves. We work with some of them. They want training. They want to understand this better themselves too, because oftentimes we put on them. We want them to take care of everything. And it's probably a social service, that's needed, or something like that. We're putting everything on the shoulders of the police. It's just you reform it in a way that makes sense. It's total reform, and but as you say, Kathy, we don't want to pit police and say we don't need police, we don't need that. It makes no sense. What we have to
Got
do
it.
is always think in an integrated way, to get the whole picture and work with what we have. And some are getting special training because they've asked for it. And that's good because they're interested in that. And if they're interested in that, they get some special training. And but people, I mean, it's so ridiculous. Why would you throw a person in jail or in prison for having a disease? Are there any other diseases we throw people into prison for? And here we have this disease, and what we want to do, people saying lock them up, lock them up, lock them up. It makes absolutely no sense. When they come out, they've had absolutely no help. So they come out and they're doing the same thing they did before they went in because they haven't gotten any help. They haven't gotten the proper treatment that was needed, you know. And then we fill up our jails, which is ridiculous. Instead, we should be putting up treatment centers to send people to, not jails. Jails aren't treatment centers. Yeah.
I want to tag along. 28 days doesn't do it. That's
No.
what I got. And what I got out of that is a little bit of unfogginess and then a plan to do everything I was supposed to do, but then maybe down the line in a year or so, go back to it. Because I didn't understand it as a disease. 28 days just doesn't do it. You're dealing with too much. And I didn't grow up from poverty. So if you have people in poverty that can't read, a lot of the people at Serenity Point with me, they can't read. So there's addicts really need a whole lot, I think. So Ed's got a question over there.
Yes, I asked that, sorry, earlier about environmental issues, but I'd like to ask the question that was in the box. In the beginning stages of your recovery, how did holding on to your faith help you as you continued to face the daily battle of addiction? Did you feel like your faith fluctuated, or did it become stronger through the 12-step process?
Yeah. Well, you lose faith in yourself. I never lost faith in God. I had a special rock I sat on. I just didn't know what God wasn't doing more for me. And I just didn't know why God wasn't, letting me drink, let me enjoy this substance. I think there's probably going to be drinking in heaven. I'm kind of counting on it, but I can't, I knew you'd get that. But I just couldn't understand it as a brain disease. And I think 28 days really stinks because you're just waking up. Your brain's just healing a little bit to where you can understand.
This is a chronic disease. Chronic by its very nature means long time. It's a chronic disease, and we have to have models, with long-term modeling, individualized support. No two people are the same. Some will take much longer than others, through their treatment process. And then we just keep we kept doing the same things over and over again. Tell them to detox, took them out. We'd have people who got out of detox and they were drunk before they got back to the county. It was just, the approach was one that was really misunderstanding. We didn't understand the chronic disease. And I think more than anything else we get out of this to understand that addiction is a chronic disease. By its very nature, what does chronic mean? Long term. It goes on and on and on. And then to be able, everybody knows that, I'm in recovery, and there's nothing, I'm not ashamed of that. I have this disease, and I'm doing what I need to do as a person with this disease. And as you have maybe high blood pressure, and you're doing what you need to do to stabilize your pressure. and nobody's putting that down. So I think we're beginning, and we're certainly at the beginnings, and some places are more advanced than others, where really it's being understood much, much more than it ever has before. But dear God, it is a chronic disease of the brain, and that's all we have to know.
Yeah, we have about 5 minutes left. And I know it's something you've been talking a lot about is fighting stigma. And I also think there are probably many of us on this call who work and or love somebody with an active addiction. Could you speak to how it is best for those friends or family, whoever's working with someone with an active addiction, how we could best support them, and how those who do not have an addiction can get support themselves. Um,
I'll say first, one of the first things in answer to your question, please don't ignore it. If you have a coworker or somebody and it's obvious that they're not in control of their drinking or drugging, whatever it is, don't step away and just hope that it goes away. Uh, if you're uncomfortable with it, talk to some people that you can who understand this disease, or some treatment people, and let's talk and have a conversation with the person, because it is a shame-based disease because of the stigma that we've put on it. And we say shame-based, they don't even call it a disease. So it's so important. Don't let anybody go that you see really, they're in trouble. I don't care what the drug is that they're in trouble with. Don't just ignore it. And if you're afraid to face it with them, I can't tell you the number who are just asking for somebody to care enough about them that they're ready to speak with them. They're ready to have a conversation with them, because it's so shame-based for some people. They don't think anybody wants anything to do with them. So please, if you see it, you recognize it, you might be a little bit afraid of attending to it yourself, get some help, but don't let that person go without at least having the conversation. The conversation, a gentle and respectful conversation, means more than anything else.
There's professionals that can do interventions, and I think interventions are really important. That's what Beth and Elizabeth and Sister Sharon and Sister Gretchen did with me. That's a hard thing, but you want the professional help to intervene and to get the person to look at themselves. That did happen to me, even though it just made a crack in the denial. It didn't, that was in whenever it was, 80, 85. But it cracked into the denial. I mean, I was going for counseling to Beth for my family issues, for their drinking. I didn't drink like them. I didn't get drunk, see, for a while, till the last couple of years. So I didn't, I recognize alcoholism as drunkenness or skid row people or that kind of thing. So I think it's important to intervene, to name it and try to get it tamed, and an intervention with the family, not just a sloppy one. You can't overwhelm us. You just have to get a few people, get some training on how to do it. There's people out there that do that. And I'm not trained as an interventionist, but if any of you have family members and you're concerned, I'm willing to talk to you. I just lost my nephew in April, 49. And I hope we're not going to keep counting, but he makes 49, he makes 5. 2 nieces, nephew, brother, sister-in-law. It just kind of runs wild in my family, so don't wait.
It is a genetic disease.
do you
The Irish, they want to, the Irish don't like second. We're second. I forget who's first, and the Indians and Natives are third, but we're probably bucking the Irish to be up there in the first.
We always called it the Irish virus.
You two ladies, thank you so much. Have any closing remarks that you wanted to tell us that you didn't tell us? Anything about fighting stigma or how to seek help or anything like that?
I think more than anything, to keep open, and allow conversations around this with whether it's family members, whether it's friends, but just don't let it go if you see somebody really suffering and you're afraid. Maybe just somebody saying, I've heard somebody say to somebody else, a friend, uh, uh, don't you think you're just drinking too much? You know, and it right away puts the thought right into the mind. He said it kindly, he said it respectfully, and the person was forever grateful he said it. You know. And then those who have had some training and understanding about the disease and treatment, I can tell you, I was in a place in New Jersey where 16-year-old he was obviously a blooming alcoholic at 16. And his classmates had training in their school curriculum in this particular high school in New Jersey. And so his friends knew right away. They began to see from what they were learning about the disease and looking at their friend that he was in trouble, and they knew he was. So what they did, they stopped. They didn't say anything to him in the beginning, but he was never invited to any of their parties because he never stopped partying as they went home, and he was still partying. Then they were able to face him and confront him up front about his drinking. And that young man got help and is sober today.
Great.
All
Well,
know the serenity prayer. We could close with that.
yeah.
If you know it, say it with me. Beth knows it. God, grant me the serenity to accept
To
the
accept the
things I
things I cannot
can,
change, the
the
courage to
courage
change
to
the
do
things I
things
can,
I
and the
can, and the
wisdom
wisdom to
to
know
know.
the difference. Amen. So thank you. And if I can help anybody, just go to the Big Laurel website and I'll hook up with you. Thank you.
Thank you for listening.
Thank you.